Hello and good evening to everyone who has joined. You have made it to the Lynn Tree Committee information session. We're going to give folks a few minutes to join because people may be getting out of work. They may be downloading Zoom. I think a lot of us have become really experienced with that, but we'll just give folks until about 6:02, maybe we'll say, to join the meeting. This meeting will be recorded, so it's already recording. If you feel comfortable with your video on, you can keep it on. If you don't want it on, you can have it off. And we will give people a couple minutes to join. For people who are already here, is the chat functional? Can you see the chat in Zoom? Yes, I'm seeing someone typing in the chat. So that's what I would like to use for this first meeting. If you have something you'd like to put in the chat, just be mindful that we will also save the chat. And, if you say something in there, we might send it out. So um, just be mindful of that. But the chat seems to be a good place to be working. So while I'm talking, if something comes to mind, you have a question, I will definitely address those at the end. So we're just giving another minute for folks to join who may be trying to join. And then I will share my screen for some presentation slides that we have to kind of kick us off, get people on the same page if they haven't met me or been on a meeting before. And there's a couple more people, so I'm glad I waited. All right, and that's 6:02. So I will do a little bit more of a formal introduction and I'll end up marking that on the YouTube video for people who might just be watching. So welcome and thank you for coming. This is the Lynn Tree Committee information session. This is a session that we wanted to do because so many people responded to an interest form that we put out to kind of gauge the Lynn community and people who might not be in Lynn but might care about trees in Lynn, to put their input on whether we should form a tree committee, how that tree committee should function, what it could focus on. This is a really exciting time for urban forestry in the city of Lynn. We actually have accepted 3 new grants now for urban forestry in the city. The total of those grants I'll discuss in the presentation and kind of what they are. But this session is really just to update everyone on what we saw in our Lynn Tree Committee interest form, which was open from August 5th to September 13th. It's actually secretly still open right now. So it is updated as of today when we did receive one more response. So we're really looking forward to everyone's feedback. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, but just for anyone who hasn't met me, my name is Erica Holm. I am a certified arborist and I am the City of Lynn's new Urban Forestry Fellow. That means I'm here for the next 3 years to help us write an urban forest plan, to plant trees, and to just overall kind of address and amplify an urban forestry program within our municipal boundaries. So thanks for coming. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I can figure out. Can people see the screen? Someone give me a thumbs up. Yes, okay, I'm seeing nods. I probably won't be able to see the chat while I'm running this and I don't have helpers. So if there is stuff in the chat and there's something urgent that needs to be addressed, someone can just feel free to unmute while I'm talking if it's something really urgent. Otherwise, we'll save time at the end of the meeting and we'll answer people's questions and hear any feedback they may have. So I won't be able to see y'all, but you can see me. So, yep, it's Thursday. It's the 19th of September. You haven't missed much. This is our first meeting for this, and this is kind of the presentation format we'll have as we go through. I think I'll be able to keep admitting people. Let's see. Yes, let me pull that up here just as an admin thing. All right, so just overall, the state of Massachusetts has a really long history of urban forestry, which some of you may be super familiar with, some of you may be less. Every municipality is required to have a tree warden, so someone to care about Chapter 87 of the Mass General Laws. This presentation will be available on our website, so you'll be able to click the links after. So don't worry if you're taking notes or screenshots of slides. I will just post this whole presentation, so don't worry too much. That link is just to the law section of the Mass Tree Warden's website. I know everyone is super excited about that. that is a website that I spend a lot of time on. And right now, basically what we have in Lynn, I've been here since June. I started on June 10th, and I've kind of been evaluating how current urban forestry is happening across the city. And what we've got is really a reactive urban forestry program. We are addressing tree concerns kind of as people notice them in the community. That means we are reacting, we're doing our best to serve the community, but we don't necessarily have like a tree inventory, a program where we know where every tree is and what condition that tree is in. That's part of the reason why these new grants have been applied for and why the city has accepted this new funding is that urban forestry is very hard. It takes deep expertise in arboriculture and also public works. When is a tree dangerous? Um, when is a tree dead? These are a lot of things that people might not notice in their day-to-day lives and might not necessarily always have a reason to know. So increasing capacity to understand what we have for urban forest resources and how we can improve those resources is really what we're here to do. So these are the 3 grants. We have an Arbor Day Foundation and Inflation Reduction Act grant, $550,000, super exciting. That's what allows me to be here on the staff in the city. And I've kind of tried to put this in some timelines and outcomes and really lay it out so that people can understand what we're trying to do here. So we accepted 2 new grants. That's why our total is up in the 600,000 range now for urban forestry. But each grant is to do a different scope of work. And this really is not the tree committee's scope of work, but I want anyone who's interested in the tree committee and anyone who ends up being on the tree committee to be aware of the resources that we have in the current systems that we're in. So there's a little bit of background on where we are now. Let's see, let me advance. So we promoted our interest form for the tree committee with this text here. So I just wanted to give folks background on what we put up there. DCR has had a great fact sheet about tree boards and committees for several years, kind of framing like, well, what is a tree committee and why would we have one? Normally, they are local groups for each municipality that works together with the public agencies to help improve an urban forest. They can all be set up totally differently. There are maintained lists of tree committees and advocacy groups around the state that Mass Tree Wardens and also some of the other public agencies put together. And then I also included a link about the New York Department of Environmental Conservation. Their 7 habits of effective tree boards and committees. If we make a Lynn Tree Committee, which spoiler alert, we're going to do. We want it to be effective. We want the things people are saying to not only be heard, but we want to get put on a path to make some policies and procedures that we can kind of advance to really sustain over time. Just planting one tree here and there, it's easy to forget about them. It's easy to not maintain them. It's easy for them to be very far apart across the city from each other. And what we really want is a sustainable program. So we also want a sustainable committee. So I've provided some examples. Boston is forming its Urban Forest Advisory Committee right now. They're doing so after the creation of a public tree ordinance. In Lynn, we don't have a tree ordinance right now, so we're doing things in a different order than other communities. We are going to be forming our tree committee and engaging with community members before and while we create our urban forest plan. And if we do a tree ordinance, we would also like to have the tree committee already in place. The Brookline Tree Planting Committee is the oldest tree committee in the state. They really focus on planting trees, and they're a small committee, about 3 members. The Boston, by comparison, is going to be like somewhere around 12 members. So this is just to say they're all different, and we can set ours up how we think will best serve the community in Lynn. That's why we did the interest form, was to figure out what you guys think a tree committee in Lynn could look like. We also need to fulfill our grant requirements, which do focus pretty heavily on community engagement. And we'd like to form an advisory group to collaborate with myself, the Urban Forestry Fellow, and others during the creation of Lynn's first urban forest plan. And I wanted to have a picture over here, but I don't have a picture of a tree ordinance because we don't have one. I don't have a picture of the tree committee because we didn't make one. And as we do this, maybe we'll take a screenshot at the end of this meeting or something, and then we'll have a picture to go on this slide. I wanted to just show people a timeline, and this will be available. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but We are in September right now, if anyone's forgotten, and we had a lot of interest form responses. I like to make a timeline as I go so that when we're, 5 years out down the urban forest plan, we can really see how things have evolved. So this is mainly just a placeholder slide that in the future, I hope gets filled up with tons of wonderful things. This is just a copy of how we promoted our interest form. You guys have already mostly seen this if you filled out the form, but this was what we sent out to people just so that they could have an open line of access to speak with me or to fill out or learn more about tree committees. Now we'll get to the part that this meeting is all about, which is the results. So we heard from 41 people. That's pretty amazing. I think a lot of people thought we were going to get 5 responses to this, or maybe some lower interest. But we created a website for urban forestry. It's lindencommons/urban-forestry. If you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. Add some things to the map, whatever you feel like doing on that website, and you can keep up with what we're up to there as well. But we received a lot of responses. I think we did a good job sending this out to community members. I think we all know there's a lot more people who could have responded to this, but may not have been aware that we were even doing this yet. So this doesn't reflect everyone in Lynn, but it does reflect a lot of people who answered, a lot more than we usually get. Most of the people who responded do live in Lynn, and most of the people who responded are also property owners in Lynn. So one big thing is that in my position, I can help with urban forestry kind of directly on public land, but for private land, which is usually in Massachusetts municipalities where quite a few large trees do exist, um, I can't actually go on private properties and work on those trees. I can only work on public trees and public land. So the urban forest plan, though, in my opinion, and maybe some others on this call, should focus on the holistic urban forest. So private trees are a part of the urban forest. And for anyone who I didn't clarify this for, the urban forest is all of the trees and woody vegetation within the municipality. So anything with a woody stem is going to count towards our urban forest. And urban forests provide a lot of benefits to people. So shade, cooling from that shade, stormwater filtration, and I hope this person wasn't in the waiting room too long. I was getting kind of carried away. But trees provide a lot of benefits. A lot of people are already on board with and understand those benefits. A lot of people have never thought about trees and would never have thought of this as something to take on before. And the point with these respondent details are we wanted to see who might be an urban forester and who might be an arborist, but we also want to see, like, do you work for a business in Lynn? Do you are you a member of a group that's active? We had quite a few of those. Are you a public employee? Are you not a public employee? We just wanted to kind of see who's interested in trees already here. And the main takeaway from this is that we did get a lot of residents and a lot of property owners who were interested in urban forestry. Also, a lot of people who work in Lynn, and about 3 urban foresters who have experience with trees in urban settings. So that's very exciting. This is the great one. Nobody didn't want a tree committee. Everyone wanted a tree committee, and everyone wanted to receive emails and further information about what we're doing. This is really fantastic. This helps us build our email list. This helps us build our phone database so that we can be in touch with you if you are interested, or if you have ideas, or if you just want to follow along. So this was really great to see. As for the name of the group, that was a little bit more split, and I'm sure there will be more discussion on this, but most people just wanted to call it the Lynn Tree Committee. That seems to be what's easiest. Somebody did do one that I think is pretty special for some folks who've been in Lynn their whole lives, maybe. Friends of Lynn Urban Forest would abbreviate to FLUFF. So there could be something there. Lynn Urban Forest Friends abbreviates to LUF, so there could be some good stickers like "We Love Trees," things like that. But the Lynn Tree Committee seemed to be the most popular, with 61.5% of our respondents, 41 of them, wanting that to be the name of the group. Here we get into the important stuff, and I'm going to try to this was an Airtable graph, so it doesn't actually show the full like what the response actually is, but I can help with letting people know what the group goals came out as. I was really happy to see people put their own goals in there. I think we should come up with as big of a list of goals as represents the community in Lynn, and then work together to figure out which are most important. One thing that I wanted to talk about is that most people wanted to get work done. So helping with tree inventory, helping with planting, helping with actually doing some of this urban forestry work. I think that's amazing. And I'm very excited to bring people on, do some pruning trainings, do some planting trainings, really bring people up to speed who may not be urban foresters on how we can make these little changes to what we're doing to keep trees on the landscape for much longer than they would be if we just rushed at doing all the work with no plan. You know, I was really happy to see that the tree committee people were responding that they would want to work to bring in more resources. I think a lot of people get excited about tree planting. People do not get excited about tree maintenance. And funders are starting to notice that if you don't invest in tree maintenance, many of these young trees die in the first 3, 4, 5 years, maybe some even in the first year, if we have drought conditions like we've tended to have over the past few years. So I was excited to see about the creativity and working to bring in more resources. A lot of people, so over half of the respondents wanted to have the tree committee be advising city staff on urban forest planning, the planting plans, the species selection, things like that. That is a great goal. And then advocate for better urban forest management. That's another important one. One of the less popular options that was in the form was to reduce conflicts by creating a forum for urban forestry. I think it was maybe a little less popular because creating a forum for urban forestry sometimes results in more conflicts because people may have different perspectives on the trees and they may end up fighting about what should happen with one tree or another. I think one big takeaway here is that someone did say all of the items listed above are important. I did try to put in the form like some things that would maybe be really easy to start and get like kind of sink our teeth into as a committee. But you know, starting a food forest, these promoting citizen awareness, these are really great group goals. And this was just for the forum, so there might be more ideas out there. And then for the group function, that's also really important. Maybe a less exciting topic, but if you're going to form a group, you really want to think about, well, how is this group going to work? Are they going to meet together and what are they going to actually do? And this is to kind of form the mission and the statement of purpose for the tree committee if we write up those things formally. And by far the most popular response was to preserve, protect, and promote the city of Lynn's urban forest, which is a really good mission statement, I think, for the group as a whole. It's simple, it's clear, it allows for a lot to be done as well. And then a lot of people were, again, in favor of advising on site-specific things. So we'll have to talk about that, especially because we don't have a tree ordinance right now. We don't necessarily have like some of these important pieces of planning infrastructure yet. We'll have to talk about those site-specific things as we go. One of the big things of my grants is that we would not want to take this influx of resources and spend it all in one neighborhood of the city. That would not be equitable urban forestry, and people would get left out of the benefits of trees. There's also there's a lot of studies in the literature, the scientific peer-reviewed literature, that show that in most cities, the hottest parts of the city and the parts of the city with the least trees and with the most historic disinvestment in trees, those tend to be the poorer neighborhoods. Those tend to be the hotter neighborhoods. Those tend to be the neighborhoods that have been left behind. So, you know, every neighborhood in Lynn is important and should receive good urban forestry. That's why we're making an urban forest plan, is because we need to plan out how we're going to make these investments. I was super psyched to see someone said help mobilize citizen scientists. That's something that I used to work on at Mass Audubon as their urban ecologist. And I think that citizen science is a lot more important than people realize. A tree inventory, a community tree inventory can be done, and it can really help people connect and learn about the trees that they live with. Again, I was excited to see that someone put all of these. And then watering trees as needed. I think the tree committee could be very helpful in creating sort of adopt a tree program that lets individual residents have some input over trees outside their home and be a part of their care. And then this help oversee provide, that's updating a tree inventory as well. So some of these do kind of go together. And I was really excited at how many people wanted to do education and work collaboratively across departments. We can't do it as one perspective or another. We have to really do urban forestry together. So to synthesize that, for the tree committee, this is kind of what I've put together, open to feedback on this as we go. But I think the mission of the tree committee in Lynn would be to preserve, protect, and promote the urban forest here in Lynn. And then I think some of that work would take place by advising and supporting urban forestry planning and work in the city of Lynn by collaborating with the planning department. That's the department I'm housed in. The Department of Public Works, or DPW, the tree warden, who's kind of, that position is facilitated through DPW, and other agencies as well. I saw some of our DCR foresters are on the line, so thank you for that, and some other arborists that we work with who are really important partners in the city. And then just engaging Lynn residents from really a cross section of the city. We really need to see a diversity of people having access to this group and having access to give their opinions here. One of the things that's going to be something that we will be able to ramp up is going to be language access. So I only speak English, but the city has a language access coordinator in the mayor's office who is helping us translate our flyers into Spanish right now. And then as we kind of go, I'm sure there will be other languages that we will be translating materials into and facilitating interpreted conversations with as we go. So we're really grateful to have those resources. But for now, this is only in English. We are going to get, I think, this video translated. So the structure, we're on Zoom right now. That might not be everybody's preference. I definitely saw in this kind of smorgasbord of structure. This question has many different answers about the membership, about the timing of meetings, about the place of meetings. Normally you're supposed to have each question on a form only deal with one topic, but I wanted to make the form quick for people. And most people seem to think like, whatever meeting format results in the most attendance is what we should do. I do really agree with that. I'm new to the city of Lynn. I don't really know how to reserve a room in City Hall yet, so I'm going to be asking for that training and figuring out how to do that. And then someone actually suggested the ranger station at Pennybrook Road as a place. We would have to definitely ask the Lynn Woods if that would be amenable. But I do think that maybe quarterly, one of the meetings being in person would be a great way to get to know each other, great way to go out and see some trees together. So that can be a really inspiring thing to do. Maybe some of those fall and spring meetings, the Lynn Tree Committee would be together planting a tree or something like that for its meeting. But this was the most exciting part of all, is that almost everyone who responded wanted some of the members of the tree committee to have experience with municipal urban forestry or arboriculture. A lot of communities don't have arborists around, so it can be a big hurdle for people to learn all of that knowledge that comes with becoming an arborist. But in Lynn, people are like, yeah, bring the arborist. Let's have them in there and let's show what we can really do here and have, mix of professionals and people who've never heard of urban forestry before, all working together and sharing ideas. So yeah, monthly seemed to be a good way to start. So we're going to have monthly meetings. I think they're going to start on Zoom and maybe only on Zoom until I figure out how to get those rooms that can do both. I would also need a second person to help admit attendees and kind of manage the online room while I'm doing the in-person. So just letting people know that it does take a lot of effort on our part to coordinate and administer these types of things. So we are going to do our best, but we would like to have some in-person and some virtual as well. One thing is that I think we should have all these meetings recorded. I think that people's opinions, should be heard. And so these would be public meetings that are advertised out as to when they're happening, and really inviting people every time and kind of, if there's new people to the group, explaining what we're doing again every time, just because not everyone may be, not everyone has been to a tree committee meeting before. So this slide is quite boring, but it basically just reflects what I just said. This will be an advisory group to the urban forest planning staff, especially at first while we don't have an urban forest plan released. That'll be a key component of what this group does, just to ensure that everything's collaborative and everything's effective and that everything's being decided on. Things about individual trees. Usually those require DPW assistance, and those need to get routed to the associate commissioners so that they can kind of go to the tree warden or go to the tree crew. I am an arborist. I do know how to climb and prune and do things for tree health, and I know how to plant. That doesn't mean that I can get out there and just do all of that work, especially immediately. There's thousands of trees in the city, and we have one in-house tree crew that works very hard to accommodate those requests and kind of complete the removals that are needed, complete the stump grinding that's needed to replant. Cutting the tree pits is a whole different thing. So just to let people know that, anything that requires DPW to address it will be routed to them, and will not necessarily be performed by myself or this group. For most people to be able to attend, it needs to be outside of normal working hours, which makes it complicated for a city hall staffer as well, because Tuesday nights we work late so that people can come into city hall and talk to us. So we wanted to avoid Tuesday nights. We wanted to have meetings at nights so that more people could attend them. We want to give time for presentations and for people to give their input. So this is just what we have proposed right now, is an hour-and-a-half meeting on the third Thursday of each month, and those would be on Zoom, recorded, and public meetings. I would like to do hybrid, but don't have a room reserved for that yet. And I would want to make sure that that would go smoothly for people before we would just jump right into that. Happy to receive comments on this. And then again, group membership should reflect diversity across the city, rotate on a regular basis, include some arborists, and include voices that are not normally heard when it comes to trees. I think there's certain wards in Lynn that talk about trees more than others. So we would want to be, as a group, kind of boosting engagement across all the wards. And I'm really looking forward to that. And then myself, you can always submit questions, comments, things about the tree committee, anything about the urban forest at all can always come to my email. Mail it to City Hall room 303 or give me a call. My contact info is at the end of this presentation. And then here's like the real good slide. This is some of the things that people said in the open-ended response parts of our interest form. The main, like, it warms my heart to see this, is just the exuberance that we would even be doing this. I think people have been asking for support with trees for a long time in Lynn, and just the fact that some residents encouraged the planning department to apply for the grants. My colleague Lauren Drago, who is a superstar, went out and put together these incredible, innovative grant proposals. I know a lot about other communities in Massachusetts and around the United States who are trying to get some of these urban forestry resources. Most of them just get funding for tree planting, and they never invest in the structures to maintain those trees, or a person to really care about with their whole position and their whole heart about these programs. In Lynn, that's what we did. Hired a person, we're kind of focusing on the long term. It's focused on sustainability. It's not just focused on a one-time influx and then you leave and then the trees die. So I was really seeing that even in comments from people who were saying like, oh, well, I'm not an expert. But then you see in their comment that they're thinking on the time span of trees, which is longer lived than humans. Trees don't care about this fiscal year or next fiscal year. Trees care about 50 years from now. They care about the drought that happened 2 years ago. They care about, the piece of string that's tied around the branch that girdles the branch. That's what trees are operating on, is a long time span. So I just put this slide up to show that people really care about heat islands. That means we need trees to grow and have large canopies. People care about the beauty and the value of their communities. So when you plant trees along a whole street, you can change the entire character of that street. You can reduce crime on that street. You can increase the feelings of happiness and mental health, and you can increase people's physical activity because the street is just a nicer place to be on. You can actually calm traffic. Streets that have trees, that's a lot of E's and T's. Streets that have trees definitely have calmer traffic. So that could be something interesting to a lot of people. And I was very heartened to see people thinking about climate. We're a coastal city. Our trees are vulnerable to salt and erosion and changing temperatures and changing droughts. So it's good to see that people are thinking about that. And yeah, I really was excited to see people wanting to plant trees and wanting to see this happen. So with that, that is pretty much what I had for the interest form results. And I'd like to just take the second half of the meeting to discuss what the people who are here would like to say, what they'd like to express, anything that I said that they'd like to dig into a little bit more. And again, we are recording this and we'll try to have it translated. This photo here is from the first planting of the Arbor Day Foundation grant. This was on August 14th. Normally you wouldn't plant trees in August. You would plant trees in mid-October to November because our planting windows are going to be in those times of year of spring and fall. And those are changing as the climate conditions get worse. But normally you don't plant a tree in the summer. You can actually see that we had our Lynn Summer Youth, we had our mayor, we had our counselors, we had our DPW staff, we had community members come out, plant this tree. We're very grateful to the DCR foresters who brought their truck. You can see it in the back left. They have a big watering tank on their truck. So we were able to do what's called watering in on this tree. And we've been watering this tree with 5-gallon water cooler jugs into a gator bag that I installed on the tree. And we've been looking at this tree pretty much every week. I remulched it last week. So this tree was planted on August 14th as part of our Liberty Tree Day celebration. That's August 14th every year. And it actually honors the Liberty tree in Boston that was removed in 1775 by British soldiers. But that was the first public shade tree ever planted in 1646. So this was an American elm. The variety is a Dutch elm disease resistant cultivar called New Harmony. Also has pretty good branch structure. You can actually see that on this tree. It's got wide branch angles. And it was a pretty large tree that we planted. So I'm very grateful for the help of some machines from Bartlett Tree Experts, the crew leader who came out and helped us actually maneuver this tree. It was a big balled and burlap tree into the hole. He actually was from Lynn, so that was a very nice connection. And this tree is doing pretty well out there. So with that, I'm going to just stop sharing so I can see people. I hope nobody's was waiting in the waiting room too long. And I'd be happy to, if people want to try to use the raise hand feature, or just if you unmute and you happen to talk at the same time as someone else, I'll let you know who can go first. Happy to take questions or have a discussion about the tree committee at this point. I see Courtney's hand. Go ahead and unmute Courtney.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I really just, Erica, wanted to hear more about you. You said you work for Mass Audubon and you are an arborist. But as our tree fellow, what is your position? I'm sorry.
Thank you
Tree
for the
fellow?
question. Yeah, that's great. I always try to
Okay.
be like, oh, enough about me. Put the
No, I
trees
want
in
to
the
hear more
paper.
about you.
But I think people do need to know, and I'm really excited for people to get to know me. So yeah, I'm originally from New Hampshire, Southern New Hampshire. My dad was a mechanical engineer at GE for like 35 years. I don't know, maybe something along those lines. So I do have a connection to Lynn through that. And I went to UNH, so the University of New Hampshire, for 7 years. I have a bachelor's of science in wildlife and conservation biology. So I started out working with songbirds in managed landscapes. So I've kind of always been in these landscapes that are highly modified by people, but nature's still here. So I don't have a master's degree, but I did 3 years of graduate school in the same thing, natural resources, wildlife and conservation biology, also at UNH. And when I left UNH, I started working at the Emerald Necklace Conservancy in Boston. And I was immediately kind of put in charge of caring for 10,000 trees in the oldest green infrastructure project in Massachusetts. So that was quite intimidating. But I saw how hard the tree warden in Boston, how hard the contractors on my pruning contracts in Franklin Park, how hard they were working, how willing they were to share their expertise about trees. And while I was at UNH, I had never heard of urban forestry. So even if you are trained in natural resources, you don't always necessarily specialize in trees and urban habitats until you find that industry. And then if it sinks its claws into you, you don't really get away from it. It's kind of like, oh, I found my people and I found my thing. So caring for those trees in Boston was a really amazing experience for me. I did that role for 2.5 years at the Emerald Necklace. We did everything from resolving a planting contract that didn't really work to getting all those trees pruned. We planted trees on Arbor Day. That was probably my favorite work that I did at the Emerald Necklace. Was we planted 10 trees around White Stadium in 2021 with Boston Public Schools, and we did 10 more down by Seaver Street, so an under invested part of Franklin Park in 2022. All 20 of those are still alive, and they're quite large now. And for me, it was really meaningful because it was a project that a lot of folks said had too much red tape to even be attempted, and it wasn't going to happen. And we made it happen as a team. So those trees are really wonderful. And then I started working at Mass Audubon as their urban ecologist. That was a position that was supposed to be like statewide, thinking about where nature should be in all of the cities in Mass. And I really had found my passion and had started on my path of becoming a certified arborist on the side by that point. And I just found that at Mass Audubon, it was a great position, great experience. I also planted trees. I worked out of the Boston Nature Center, and I think I planted about 150 trees. I was also in that role for 2.5 years, did a lot with partners, Speak for the Trees in Boston, a lot of kind of regional partnerships there. But I really believe in community engaged urban forestry. That's what I'm passionate about it. My dream is to be a tree warden in Massachusetts. I have the entire book of case law about that right here. It's very large. And I also have been working for about 4 years on Saturdays. I do tree work on a crew. So I do that to gain experience with private land arboriculture. What do people ask for on their landscapes? How do you climb and prune a tree? Because when I was at the Emerald Necklace, I saw those people day to day, getting up at 6, going out, working on trees, actually physically being in the trees, planting trees, and it's very hard. It's also very dangerous work. And I just want to understand everything that goes into urban forestry. So my connection to urban trees is very strong. I treat the trees I plant like they're like my kids, which is a bit insane. But I'm really glad that this position opened up in Lynn and that it was funded by the grant money that's coming in from the federal things in a way where I could move up here. I live in Swampscott. I couldn't find a place to rent in Lynn that was cheap enough for me to live in Lynn, but I'm just down the street. And yeah, I can't do any private arboriculture work. Like I can't be climbing and pruning trees inland. My role here is really to help develop the urban forest plan, to plant 150 trees by the end of the grant, which is a 3-year contract, and to actually start a youth program. We didn't talk about that much, but workforce development has been a big part of my career path because I don't have that master's degree, and I found it very difficult to get into a job that would sustain my life. And also, there's not a ton of women in urban forestry. It was kind of hard for me, and now I want to pass that on. So So, for example, in Boston, we brought in $3.6 million in federal funding to form the Boston Tree Alliance. That's now being led by the environmental fellow that we had hired that I mentored, and she's now doing an amazing job running that program. So what we really want to do is make a workforce development program, get other people involved, and having access to jobs like the one I have in the future. Did that cover it? That felt like a lot of talking. Susan, I see your hand. Go ahead and unmute if you can. You're still on mute now, so we can't hear you yet. I'll let you
There you
know.
go.
There
I
you
think
are.
I'm now. I just saw last night the Cambridge Forum presentation about the guest was Diana Beresford Roniga. She was fascinating. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's had, well, it would be too long for me to say it, but it was spirituality in relationship to trees and the work she's doing to find some of the oldest trees. And I guess I'm real interested in all this and wanting to find a group like this. And one of my questions sort of is how do we get the word out to find out who else is interested, what people can do? And my special interest is the youth of education right from the beginning of getting folks out into nature. I mean, it isn't even just trees, it's the ocean, it's the things we have in Lynn that are so wonderful and unusual. And I guess that's one of my main goals is to see how we can start that exploration and education early with the schools, with their
That's
guides.
an incredible point, incredible question, Susan. It really starts there. The trees that we're planting, they won't be large, extremely large 30-inch canopy trees like during my lifetime, for example. There can be different schools of thought on this, and they're all okay. But I think there's a saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Next best time is like right now, except for if it's in the summer or in the winter. You wouldn't want to do that. But I think it's really important to get people connected with nature. A big part of my role at Mass Audubon had to do with nature connection and actually other people's roles at that organization. So a couple recommendations I have. Number one are that there maybe be a subgroup of the tree committee that's focused on education, and not just for youth, but like really focused on education strategies. We may need some education professionals to be involved. A couple updates that I haven't talked about yet are that we already have been talking to the innovation director at Lynn Public Schools, Marissa Angeli. They are fantastic, big ball of energy. Really have enjoyed every time I've met with Marissa. And we actually have regularly scheduled meetings. I will be a career speaker every month in a different Lynn Public School in a different class starting this month. So we're going to be going, I'm going to be going to classical and giving my first career speaker talk, which is hopefully going to actually lead into paid employment opportunities during the school year. And then those students might be able to lead our summer cruise. So we're really thinking about all layers. Another thing I'll mention is that I have connections with Salem State, the folks who are part of the Worcester Clark University Hero program, where they actually have young people who are in college. They're actually evaluating the DCR Greening the Gateway Cities successes. So they're going out and seeing, are those trees that were planted 5 years ago, are they still alive? Why are they not alive? How did the homeowner feel if it was on private property about that planting? What types of support did they receive? So Yes, I think all of that we need to connect with all different members of the community. And so far, I've only been talking about high school and college, but there are opportunities for even younger kids to get involved with trees. Maybe not necessarily planting large trees, but what I worked on in Boston was a microforest. So we put in 333 plants of 33 different species, which was not planned, but well, was planned, but it wasn't supposed to be all threes. And we ended up having some of our preschoolers, nature preschoolers at the Boston Nature Center, out planting a sugar maple with the mayor. And we have pictures of that kind of posted out. So I would really love to have some younger people involved. I have to mention the DCR has a poster contest for I think third, fourth, and fifth graders now. It used to be just fifth graders. But they can do art related to trees, and then that actually helps out. I've seen some of that in City Hall. There's some youth art down on the first floor that has to do with trees. So there's a million different ways to do that. I think that's why we need a community engagement plan around our urban forestry plan. I think the tree committee should have an engagement group and an education group. Maybe it's the same group, and we'll get some feedback from teachers and other things. I see in the chat, Samantha's asking any thoughts on working with Lynn Tech to develop a program. Definitely Lynn Tech, Essex Tech. The Essex Aggie used to have a arborist college level program. My friend Chris from the city of Malden actually was a graduate from that years ago, and he's the tree warden in Malden now. So I think we can amplify these. I have been asked to go speak at Essex Tech already and said yes to that. They asked me for a climbing demo. I do not have insurance to be giving climbing demos, so we'll stick to the urban forestry for that. And then, yeah, any friends you have who are teachers, maybe they feel like they shouldn't be in this group. They should definitely be in this group, and we should be working natural resources into, I think, a lot of different classrooms. But just that update that we are working with the high schools now, and we will have summer youth, the Lynn Summer Youth Engagement Program. The $550,000 grant that allows me to be here also allows us to pay, I think it's a cohort of 12. We need to still make sure that that number is exactly makes sense. But 12 summer youth next year to be working
Great.
on urban forestry. The one thing is we don't have a truck or a watering truck. Like we don't have that right now. So we'll have to talk about, what should the curriculum for those Lynn summer youth be? What should the mentorship be like? Where should we take them on field trips? Things like that. And I think we have a lot of good resources for that. I think the Lynn Woods is a good resource, but I think also just being part of the community tree inventory. And then also one more note, sorry, I'm very long-winded, but in Boston, they're requiring that a member of the Boston Urban Forestry Advisory Committee, they're requiring that there be a youth seat that's always filled there. So maybe there should be a member of the youth on the tree committee if people are supportive of that. And then I'm seeing another comment in the chat. Let me just get to that one. We can do great things if we work together. That's really sweet. And then I'm seeing from Joan, we cut down 2 trees yesterday that eventually died as a result of the drought 2 years ago. I'm certain other trees in Lynn have the same issue. So this is a specific tree thing that does kind of balloon up to policy and how we can manage public trees. These sound like they might have been private trees. I do get a lot of feedback that tree removal is something people really don't want to see. I fully understand that. I have seen trees removed that I wish hadn't been in my career so far. I'm sure I'll see a lot more. I've also seen trees that represented a very large concern for public safety. One of your biggest things that you might have with like a stone dead, so like all the bark's fallen off of it, there's no leaves, it's not coming back. If that tree is in a forest, that's great habitat for pileated woodpeckers, for downy woodpeckers, for tons of decomposition insects, for rebuilding the soil. In a street tree pit, that tree could ruin someone's livelihood or take their life. So it depends on the individual tree. You're going to want a track certified arborist maybe looking at that tree to see what level of risk mitigation can be done to retain a tree like that. But there are some trees where they've died and it is their time to go. In my practice, And we're definitely going to have lots of discussion about tree removals, tree protection, especially during construction, and replanting. If you remove a dead tree or a tree of concern that may have a structural issue, it may not be dead, but it may have some storm damage that is a significant structural issue where there's lots of weight hanging over a road, for example. It may be worth our while to consider removing that tree and replanting a better species, replanting a tree with better structure now, rather than waiting, kind of keeping that tree on the landscape in a spot where we could plant now. So that's just one perspective on tree removal. I'm sorry that those trees had to go, Joan. And the drought, maybe if we had a watering program or an adopt a tree program and we can create those things together, maybe that would prevent the drought from being so severe on trees. I've definitely seen overwatering of trees, but mostly I've seen drought related loss of young trees. It takes about 3 to 5 years for a young tree to fully establish into the native soil, so get those roots growing out. When you plant a balled and burlap tree, a lot of those roots have been cut off and the tree needs time to actually build those out. So you may not see growth of the canopy until you see the roots take hold. And that's the most vulnerable time when you'll see drought stress really present itself. But it is a good point that sometimes they'll show drought stress on a delay. Trees aren't immediate. Something might be happening to them that you can't see right away. These were 15 years old, so sad. Yeah, sometimes you will see older trees. And what we're thinking about in terms of drought and climate change is really planting climate adaptive species. So this sometimes can be a hot button issue too, because climate adaptive species are not always Massachusetts County native species. Sometimes we may need to plant a Kentucky coffee tree, which is a more southern species, because our climate now, some of you may know our hardiness zones changed recently. That means that our lowest winter temperature and our highest summer temperature have changed. Our climate is going to be more like North Carolina in 2050 than it is now. So we can anticipate that we might need to think about what species are going to do well in more extreme conditions. And I'm excited to work with the tree committee on our species selection and our overall palette. DCR has a great list of species that they like to plant and that they recommend in different size categories, so small, medium, and large. You can't just plant any tree anywhere. You really want to follow a right tree, right place type of mindset where you're looking at what is the soil, what is the sun, what is the shade, what is the amount of rain that we're getting here, what pests and diseases is this species or that species susceptible to. And then a real fun one for us arborists, are there overhead wires? Are there underground utilities? Is there a septic system? Is there a water pipe that's already damaged underneath here? Is there any soil to plant in at all? There's a lot of pavement around, and the underground underneath the sidewalk can be vaults. There can be utility spaghetti. There can be any number of things. And a lot of times in street tree pits, we'll find old asphalt and old bricks, and it's just not the right stuff for trees. So we'll want to think about what species to plant where to try to get through some of these droughts and having some watering happening. And I think our youth and also community members who want to adopt a tree could be part of that, part of the solution for that. We do have 8 minutes left on this meeting, but I'm sure I'll see you all again. I see Calvin's hand. Go ahead, Calvin.
Okay, so we were talking earlier. I'm glad you're in town. Thanks and welcome. I wasn't clear how long we have you. I know fellows in the past for different other functions are usually 3-year stints. How long do we have you?
Right now, as it stands, you guys have me full timer until June 9th, 2027. So it's a 3-year position as it's written. that's not to say I want to leave in 3 years or that there is a position that I could move into after the 3 years. It's just that's where we are now. I think 3 years is a great amount of time to be thinking about. I think our urban forest plan should be released before I leave. So we're kind of planning a work plan for my position that I would be happy to discuss. I'm not going to post that publicly because like that would be a little bit much, I think. But I'm happy to think about the timeline of the urban forest plan itself. The plan should cover 10 to 20 years by, what do other communities do? So the purpose of my position is not just to do 3 years of tree planting and then leave. The purpose is really to set up some of these procedures and policies to fall back on collaboratively with you all so that after the 3 years, there's more investment and that it sustains over a long period of time.
I know a mass development fellow re-upped, so we have Joe Mulligan for 6 years,
Yeah.
and he's being replaced by Tristan Foley now. But
If the
we were
funding keeps
talking too
coming.
about my long-term idea that establishing a 3-2 urban arboreal renewal program, which means that anytime two trees are taken down for whatever reason, three are replaced to get a net gain in the canopy. But then you really excited me when you said, "Oh, I'm well beyond that." How are you funded, and where do our dreams turn into money to put literal just trees in the ground? Because it's really a funding issue, as you know.
Yes. So at the beginning of the presentation, I have a breakdown of the funding that we just acquired. What I didn't say yet is that there's other funding opportunities and that I believe we should, as a group and as the city, and also if there are organizations out there, we should fully pursue where urban forestry fits into other funding streams that are available. So there's state grants, there's federal grants, there's local grants that can be created, and really funding an urban forestry program. I have a link about that. The Urban and Community Forestry Society, formerly known as the Society of Municipal Arborists, has published stuff about this. International Society of Arboriculture has published stuff about this, but there's science on like how you should fund an urban forestry program. Just a personal anecdote that when I was in college, the federal administration changed and there was a lot of job freezes in the US Forest Service at that time when I graduated from my bachelor's. Um, a lot of stuff seems to depend on um, honestly politics, what is happening with the funding streams. So that can be a good thing for urban forestry. Right now we're seeing historic investments in urban forestry that we're taking advantage of. So the grant that hired me, that's $550,000, that grant is through the Inflation Reduction Act. That was a federal act that put out 1.5 billion across the entire United States for urban forestry. There are some other new ones, like the US EPA has these community change grants out right now. We haven't put in for one of those to this point, but it's something to add to the list. I think the tree committee could keep a list of funding opportunities that they see, and we could decide together which ones should be applied for by who and how. That would be a good way to fund an urban forestry program. Now, what you're talking about with arboreal renewal, which I love that term, I hadn't heard that before I met you, Calvin, but I do like it. That speaks more towards policies that can be written locally. So many communities have written a tree ordinance. We don't have one in Lynn right now.
That's what I've
Sometime,
been pushing for, is a
some,
3-2 program
yes,
that
and
they
so,
would
there's
just
many
build into
different
the budget
ways.
every year, hopefully.
Yes, and there's many different ways to write those ordinances. We do need to make sure that any ordinance that we write is legal to write. I was just on a webinar today called "Is Your Tree Protection Ordinance Constitutional?" It was very interesting. I was like all in on this. It was by James Komen, and it talked about
So our
cases.
law department would be a good source for that.
Yep,
Jim
and
Lamama.
so we're working with Jim already to discuss kind of like what this would be. In Boston, the tree
You're not
ordinance came
reinventing the wheel.
before. No, without reinventing the wheel. And Calvin, I would like to just finish what I have in my mind before I forget it. I've got the ADHD, so I'll forget what I'm trying to get through. So I'm just wanting to mention that in a tree ordinance, you can write different requirements for mitigation. So when One example is just when a private developer would like to put in a new development. Sometimes they may need to remove trees. If those trees are on private property, there's really not a law that's protecting those trees right now. We do have the state law, Chapter 87. That is the public shade tree law. That's the oldest public shade tree protection law in the United States. It's very strong. It establishes that every municipality needs to have a tree warden. It doesn't necessarily protect every tree on public property in the city. It mainly covers trees along public ways. So street trees are under the jurisdiction of the tree warden. That doesn't mean that trees in parks are necessarily. So as part of my position, what I'm advocating that I do and what I've already started doing is writing an urban forest report. That would be an annual report on what the status of urban forestry is, and that would include a policy section. And then, another thing about ordinances are that they can also require protection of trees during construction. So say there's going to be a public park that's renovated, it could require that those trees be protected. And that means protecting the roots, not just protecting the trunk with plywood. That means having a specification about cutting of roots, which can result not in the death of the tree immediately, but it may cause problems down the road. So in a tree protection ordinance, I know you're talking about a 3-to-2 replacement, but what I had talked to Calvin about when I was at the senior center was that different communities have different ways of doing it. Some communities have a 1-for-1 tree replacement rule. Some communities have set up a mitigation fund. So if a tree ultimately needs to be removed because of a project, there's no the person wants to remove it and they won't back down, or not won't back down, that's too conflict oriented, but say a tree does need to be removed. Sometimes communities will set up a fund where if they can't be replanted on the same property, that money needs to go into a fund, which can be used for urban forestry or tree planting in another area. So setting up systems like that is important. There's also the caliper method of replacement. So instead of, thank you so much, Courtney. Thank you for attending. Rather than replacing one tree for one tree, say you remove a 35-inch tree, you have to plant 35 1-inch trees to receive the value of that tree. So that would not be a 3-to-2 program. That would be a 35-to-1 program in some scenarios. So I think, Calvin, your program is going to be a very long discussion in the tree committee, and it's going to feel
Get the
slow.
algorithm going. So anyway, get the algorithm going.
Get the algorithm going.
I'm just disappointed that you weren't here a year ago when we
Me
made a
too.
phone call. Well, we made a phone call specifically in Central Square when Procopio was tearing down the buildings to build another 10-story right next to the MBTA tracks.
Uh-huh.
So
I've heard a lot about these trees. We do have
well,
Central on our
these
list for
trees,
this year.
yeah, well, these trees have a history of having a member of the historical commission call EDIC and saying, "Hey, what are you going to do about those trees? Because we know about staging areas, building of that scale." And we never got a phone call back. But the next day, they quickly tore down the trees. So, welcome to town. We need you to keep an eye on things.
Thank you very much. Yes, and one more comment that I'll make there is that I really believe in collaboration. So I really think that for like transparency and collaboration, and I think replacing trees in Central is something we have on our list. There's some fantastic community partners who've been advocating for that and trying to plan and working with the city and different departments to let us know that they want trees back in that neighborhood, and some other things to be redone. So not to put any part of the community out, though, like I mentioned some examples about new developments. I actually was a co-author on a paper about an affordable housing development in Boston that resulted in the protection and further enhancement of the Roslindale wetlands. So it's not mutually exclusive. Building and trees are not against each other. They should be together. When someone wants to build in Lynn, we should be talking about trees during the design phase with an arborist there to advise. Because someone who's building affordable housing is still a good person, right? Still has good intentions for the Lynn community. They may not know how to put trees into their plans at this stage. And
Well,
we would want to
Procopio is a
do, well, I
500
don't want to
pound
talk about
gorilla.
any individual. I don't want to call out any
Well,
individuals on
they're
this
Lynn's
call,
new
Calvin.
best
Yeah,
friend, but
let's
they're a
avoid that.
gorilla that sleeps anywhere they want. Anyway,
You have been heard,
you'll
though. You have
learn.
been heard.
I gotta go back to my watering. So
We are
anyway,
about
bye.
we are about 3 minutes over, but I'm happy to stay if anyone who hasn't spoken would like to ask a question, put their input in. I'm happy to stay on, but I recognize some people may have to leave.
Hi, Erica, Steve Hirsch. We spoke on the phone, and am I too late to fill out the form? I didn't get a chance to.
You are not. You
oh,
can fill out the form and I will it won't be part of this analysis in these slides, but we will keep the form open. Not necessarily pushing that people fill it out, but I am still interested in people's feedback. So go ahead and fill that out.
Okay, thank you. And as I mentioned, I'm on the board at the Boys and Girls Club, and I can put you in touch with a lot of the program people there.
That would be so wonderful as another established organization that might not be the first thing you think of when you think urban forestry, but I think that the Boys and Girls Club could be a really strong connection with the schools, with the programming they do. Let's get the arborism going, as
Oh,
Calvin would
they're
say.
very active in this with the school department and also with a lot of the science programs and other programs throughout the city.
Thanks. And I definitely don't want to call you out, Steve, but I see that you have your landscape services in the background. One thing that I don't see so much is actually private arborists and landscape folks actually being engaged in the urban forestry planning process. Sometimes there can be like conflict of interest stuff that comes up. You might hear me saying that sometimes, like, I can't do any tree work in Lynn as a private arborist because of conflict of interest. But there's not conflict of interest where it comes to like having professionals who are working day in and day out on landscapes in the city. Like their voices are needed in this process. So thank you for being here as someone who is engaged in that way.
Thank you. Yeah, we do a lot of work in the city and on the North Shore, and some work with the city on some traffic islands and some other projects too.
All right, I see Susan's hand again. I saw Scott unmuted. Scott, did you want to go first just because Susan, we did speak already? You could go next, or do
Oh,
you have
no,
to go?
Susan, go right ahead.
No, all I
Right
want to
ahead.
say is I'm really glad you're here and you put this together. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much,
Yes.
Susan. There will
Thank
be
you,
a lot
Erica.
more. Yeah, thanks, Scott. Thank you all so much for your evening time as well. That's difficult. And I see Marie is unmuted. Did you want to say a quick something?
No, I just wanted to say thank you, and I'm sorry I was late. I couldn't get the Zoom to work.
No worries. I think I might have had you in the waiting room because I was presenting and couldn't see you. So if you want, you can catch the recording. We'll probably post it in the next couple of days, and you can catch up on the beginning.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Well, I really look forward to engaging with you all. You're on my email list. I've got your numbers, all those types of things. And if I don't have if you didn't fill out the interest form, I might not have your email address or your contact information. So if you did not fill out the interest form, feel free to send that to me. It's eholm, EHOLM at lynnma.gov, or you can call, you can look at our website, and I'll send out everything. Everything will be posted there. We're really easy to get to. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great evening and look forward to hearing from you all and working with you for the betterment of the urban forest here in Lynn. Have a great weekend or
Thank
night.
you.
It's not the
Bye-bye.
weekend yet.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.